of Green Business Networking series. This event is dedicated to cap and trade and how to get prepared for upcoming legislation. This event is organized by Green Business Network. The mission of Green Business Network is to empower Indiana businesses to make Indiana a sustainable and healthy place to live for future generations. The program is as follows. First, we're going to have a panel discussion that is going to be followed by Q&A. Please raise your hands if you have questions, and GBN members will collect your cards and communicate it to the moderator. After that, the session will be open for appetizers networking. I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight, Jesse Kharbanda. Jesse Kharbanda is an executive director of Hoosier Environmental Council. Hoosier Environmental Council, as many of you know, is a statewide nonprofit organization, membership organization, that is dedicated to protecting Indiana's environment. Jesse oversees HEC strategic and program development, legislative initiatives, and outreach to key stakeholders, elected officials, and members of the media. Jesse focuses on making the case that environmental protection is critical to Indiana's effort to improve its health, economy, and heritage. Jesse previously worked at Environmental Law and Policy Center, where he helped build support among agricultural, clean energy, and economic development organizations throughout the Midwest to support provisions in the Federal Energy and Federal Farm Bill. At ELPC, he helped craft rural-focused clean energy legislation and wrote briefs on a variety of environmental policy issues. Kharbanda has a graduate degree in development economics from Oxford University, where he was a Rhodes Scholar, an undergraduate degree in economics and environmental studies from University of Chicago. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks, Lena, for your leadership in putting this series of very helpful educational forums together. And thank you all for being here on a Thursday evening to spend time with us. Obviously, the Hoosier Environmental Council is an advocate, is certainly an advocate, but we're also educators, and I'm here in the capacity of our role as educators and helping to facilitate a quality discussion on the business implications of climate change legislation, both from a big picture macroeconomic perspective and a micro or business level perspective. And our hope is that this forum, this discussion, will raise a level of understanding of this extremely important and momentous legislation, and hopefully people will come out of this room with a better sense about how Indiana can intelligently prepare for future regulatory and legislative change. To proponents of climate legislation, this type of bill, the American Clean Energy and Security Act, also known as Waxman-Markey, is about providing clean energy jobs, potentially on the order of 40,000. It also is about cutting carbon dioxide in a way that only has a modest impact on electricity rates, and it will also advance energy independence. To the opponents of climate legislation, such a bill means an erosion of competitiveness to the Indiana economy, which is so dependent on coal. It means dramatic rise in electricity rates, and it means little impact in actually making a dent in tackling the climate problem due to inaction from China and India. This panel of experts will help shed light on the underlying macro issues that both support the arguments of proponents and opponents. Tony Sullivan is an attorney and partner at Barnes & Thornburg, and he'll be shedding light, obviously, from a legal perspective. And then Anthony Paul, an economist and fellow at Resources for the Future in Washington, D.C., will be shedding light also from a macro perspective, but from a more quantitative one. Tony will describe the basic provisions of the bill and contentious policy issues that have repercussions on rates, different sectors and different state economies. Anthony, as noted, will describe in a quantitative sense the impacts of this bill, focusing on its implications on the electricity rates of Hoosier consumers. And then Mike Radcliffe will actually preface all this conversation to talk about how you can create business value through climate management. For those in the audience that want to get more of a micro set of issues, the nitty-gritty of what it means to comply with climate legislation, you will not be disappointed because we'll have 3 speakers addressing those topics. Monitoring and verification of greenhouse gas emissions will be discussed by Ann McCabe of the Climate Registry. How small business owners and homeowners deal with climate change will be dealt by Matt Morgan, also Barnes & Thornburg, and then incentives for Hoosier businesses and homes will be discussed by Kristen Pavilion of the Department of Energy in the Indian state government. The final point I want to make is that a policy discussion and a discussion of business compliance may seem all well and good to people, but at the same time, some may say, well, you know what, climate legislation may not pass this year. We saw it pass in the House. We have uncertainty about whether it will pass in the Senate. But I think my view on this question, and why I think it's very relevant for us to be all here, is that there are factors that would lead us to believe that these issues will prevail and continue in the coming years. The fact that a Gallup poll shows that the majority of Americans continue to believe in the science of global warming, that the Zogby poll contends that the majority of Americans do believe that some action is needed to cut carbon emissions. The fact that there's a great deal of consensus on the question of the need for using something like cap and trade to cut emissions. And finally, the fact that clean energy businesses and utilities all have the view that something needs to be done to provide the kind of certainty for investment on the order of billions of dollars. So with that backdrop, I think that this conversation is going to be relevant for months to come.